Khemenu, Son of the Falcon, Part 1. Chapter 1, The Serpent Idol of Thoth. The sun was setting over Wayset, painting the sacred city in hues of crimson and gold. The river Nile shimmered in the fading light, but Khemenu paid it no mind. He moved through the narrow alleys of the temple quarter like a shadow, his cloak dusty, his sandals silent on the stone. He carried no gold, no weapon, only a tightly rolled scroll tucked beneath his arm, and a growing sense of danger prickling at the back of his neck. Someone was following him. Whispers drifted from behind, where the House of Records loomed like a stone giant. He didn't need to look back. He could hear the guards closing in, slipping past market stalls and murmuring through clenched teeth. There. That's him. Khemenu ducked into a shadowed side street and emerged near the edge of the city. A final glance over his shoulder showed nothing but a swirl of dust and a flash of spearpoint. He smiled. Not the first time he'd stolen something sacred. And likely not the last. The scroll he carried had been hidden deep in the archives, sealed under a royal decree, wrapped in layers of silk and divine warnings. But Khemenu had seen the edge of the map beneath the fabric, and that had been enough. It spoke of a temple lost to the desert. A sanctuary of Thoth, god of knowledge, wisdom, and things too dangerous to write. The map, incomplete as it was, hinted at a location beyond the city walls, where sandstorms often swallowed caravans whole and jackals watched from the rocks. There, buried beneath the dunes, was said to lie the serpent idol, a relic whispered of only in myth. It was no ornament. The stories claimed it could speak with the voice of the gods, or perhaps something older. Khemenu didn't believe in curses. But he did believe in secrets. Especially the kind people tried to bury. That night, guided by starlight and intuition, he crossed the threshold of Wayset and entered the desert. He rode a borrowed camel into the emptiness, following the torn edges of the map. 2 days passed with little more than silence and wind. On the third day, he found it. Half buried in the sand, a temple jutted from the earth like the spine of some forgotten beast. Its doorway was framed by twin columns shaped like ibis feathers, cracked and worn by centuries. Glyphs wrapped around the arch, nearly erased by time, except for one that remained, a serpent coiled around a scroll. Khemenu dismounted slowly, torch in one hand, the scroll in the other. He approached the door and pressed his palm against the glyph. The stone shuddered. With a low, grinding groan, the temple opened. The air that spilled out was ancient, dry, bitter, and charged with something he couldn't name. Khemenu hesitated. Not out of fear, but respect. He'd read enough to know Thoth did not suffer fools. Still, he grinned. Let's see what you were so afraid to leave behind. He stepped into the dark. And the desert swallowed him whole. Chapter 2, Whispers in the Sand. The temple door closed behind him with a final, hollow thud, and the world outside ceased to exist. The moment Khemenu stepped beyond the threshold, the air changed. It was colder than it should have been, still, dry, and humming with something unseen. His torch flickered in the suffocating blackness, casting shadows that danced across the sandstone walls. The interior corridor sloped downward, etched with glyphs that twisted like serpents across the stone. They shimmered faintly in the torchlight, shifting subtly when he wasn't looking directly at them. Trick of the flame, he muttered. But the unease in his gut told him otherwise. He moved cautiously, stepping over broken tiles and half-buried bones, some human, some not. Dust caked the air. Every breath tasted like forgotten time. The silence pressed in around him, so absolute that he could hear his own heartbeat. Then came the first whisper. Soft, almost imperceptible, like a breeze brushing against the inside of his skull. Khemenu. He froze. Spun. No one behind him. The voice had not been real. It had come from within. Torch held high, he pushed deeper into the dark. He descended a crumbling staircase into a wide chamber, circular in shape, its ceiling held aloft by 6 columns carved in the likeness of ibis heads. The eyes of each statue were missing, gouged out, perhaps intentionally. In the center stood a pedestal. and upon it rested the idol. Golden. Coiled. Perfect. The serpent idol of Thoth. It was smaller than he expected, no larger than his forearm, but impossibly detailed. The serpent's body curled around a miniature scroll clutched beneath its chin. Its sapphire eyes gleamed in the torchlight, catching the flicker like living flame. Khemenu approached slowly, warily. Every instinct screamed that this was more than gold. More than myth. He reached out, but didn't touch it. Instead, he studied the pedestal itself. Carvings ran along its base. He brushed dust aside to reveal more of the inscription. He who awakens the voice must be willing to listen. Before he could read further, a gust of wind blew through the chamber, impossible wind, deep underground. The torch died. Total darkness. And then, you seek knowledge. The voice came not from the room, but from inside his mind, silky and cold. But wisdom has weight. Khemenu staggered back. His pulse raced. He reached blindly for the torch, struck flint, once, twice, and relit the flame. The idol was no longer on the pedestal. It was in his hand. He hadn't moved. But there it was, warm against his palm, the serpent's head now turned ever so slightly, facing him directly. Khemenu stared at it, heart pounding. What in Ra's name are you? The idol pulsed. Not with light. With thought. Images crashed into his mind, visions of a vast library consumed by fire, of gods with eyes full of stars, of a man screaming as snakes crawled from his ears. He dropped the idol with a gasp. It hit the stone floor, and did not bounce. It simply stopped. Perfectly still. The whispers returned, louder now, many voices overlapping, chanting in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. The falcon returns. The seal is undone. The voice must be heard. Khemenu backed away. But the walls had changed. The glyphs no longer shifted. They were now clear. Glowing. They spelled his name. Khemenu. 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 He turned and fled up the stairs, but the chamber seemed to stretch around him, endless and shifting. The temple was alive. And it knew him. Chapter 3, The Falcon's Mark. The torchlight flickered wildly as Khemenu sprinted through the temple's corridor, heart hammering like a war drum. The serpent idol lay heavy in his satchel, though he hadn't put it there. It was as if it had returned to him by will alone, as if it had chosen him. Behind him, the glowing glyphs on the walls pulsed like veins of fire, each one spelling his name in perfect, ancient strokes. Khemenu. Khemenu. The echo rang not just in the chamber, but in his bones. The corridor twisted unnaturally. What should have been a straight path now wound in impossible loops. He stumbled, caught himself, and pressed on. Then, abruptly, silence. No whispers. No flickering glyphs. Only stillness. Khemenu found himself in a narrow stone room, its walls etched with thousands of tiny script symbols so faint he wouldn't have seen them without the torch. At the center of the room stood a shallow stone basin filled with murky water. It shimmered faintly under the torchlight. He was breathing hard. Sweat clung to his brow. His hands trembled slightly as he approached the basin. Something drew him to it. When he looked into the water, he expected to see his reflection. He did not. Instead, the water showed a vision. A great hawk, wings outstretched, soared over endless dunes. Beneath its flight, a burning city. A river of fire. People running, screaming. And over it all, a serpent of pure light, coiled around a golden sun disk, watching with eyes like stars. Then, the hawk plummeted, wounded. A black arrow pierced its breast. Khemenu gasped and pulled back. His hand burned. He dropped the torch and yanked up the sleeve of his left arm. There, just below his shoulder, was something new. A mark. Fresh. Angry red. A falcon, stylized and ancient, etched into his skin as if burned there by divine hands. What in the name of the gods? He reached for the idol in his satchel, almost without thinking. When he touched it, the whisper returned, not a voice, but a thought, implanted directly into his mind. You are marked. You are seen. The falcon's blood has returned. The seal has begun to break. The room began to tremble. Sand poured from the ceiling. Cracks split the floor. Enough! Khemenu shouted, slamming the idol down on the stone basin. I came for knowledge, not madness. The tremors stopped instantly. Silence returned. Heavy. Watching. Khemenu staggered back, breathing hard. This is no relic. This is a curse. He retrieved the idol. It was cold again, lifeless in his hands. But the mark on his arm remained. Still burning. Still real. A falcon. Branded beneath his skin. And something told him it wasn't just a symbol. It was a claim. He turned and left the chamber, determined to find an exit from this place. The idol could be studied later. Or destroyed. He didn't care. But as he moved through the temple, the walls now calm and quiet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had awakened. Something far older than the gods men still prayed to. And that something had just whispered his name. Chapter 4, The Jackal's Envoy. The temple spat him out at dawn. The moment Khemenu crossed its threshold, the stone door behind him slammed shut, not with violence, but with finality. As though the building itself had finished what it needed to do. The rising sun bathed the sand in hues of amber and crimson, casting long shadows across the dunes. The air tasted different. Like something had shifted in the world while he was below. Khemenu stood in the silence of the desert, watching as the wind brushed across the open plains. For a long moment, he said nothing. Did nothing. Then he looked down at his arm. The falcon mark still burned faintly under the skin, not bleeding, not infected, but alive. He didn't know where to go next. So he walked. The camel he'd tied near the rocks was gone, likely scattered by some nocturnal beast or startled by the gods knew what. He had no choice but to cross the sands on foot, following the sun westward, toward a distant ridge of black stone that broke the horizon like the spine of a sleeping god. By midday, the heat pressed down like a curse. His canteen was nearly dry, and mirages danced before his eyes. He saw temples in the distance. Faces. Eyes in the sand. But one figure did not fade. It stood ahead of him, still as a statue, wrapped in black linen robes that trailed in the wind. A hood obscured its face, and a silver jackal pendant gleamed at its throat. Khemenu slowed his pace. Every instinct screamed caution. "You're real," he called out hoarsely. "Or just another mirage sent to test me?" The figure did not move. But it spoke. Its voice was quiet, calm, and utterly human, and yet it stirred something ancient in Khmenu's bones. "You have touched the seal." Khemenu stopped. His hand moved to the satchel where the idol lay, cool and silent. "Who are you?" "I am the voice of the jackal," the figure said. "I walk the boundary between the living and the dead. You may call me Setao." "Let me guess," Khemenu muttered, "you're here to warn me." The figure tilted its head, like a jackal studying prey. "The gods do not warn. They watch. The dead, however, they whisper. And they are screaming now." A gust of wind swirled around them, sending a sheet of sand across the dunes. Setao didn't flinch. "You should not have taken the idol," he continued. "It was not meant to be held. It was not even meant to be seen. Then why was it left in a temple open to the desert?" Khemenu snapped. "If this thing is so dangerous, why bury it with clues and maps and riddles?" The hooded figure was silent for a long time. Then, "Because it was not men who buried it. And the ones who did, could not destroy it." Khemenu frowned, gripping the satchel tighter. "What is it?" "Truly. Setao raised a single, linen-wrapped hand and pointed not at Khemenu, but past him, toward the temple, now just a faint silhouette in the sand. It is a vessel. A cage. And what lies within is not dead, only dreaming. Khmenu's heart slowed. And I woke it. You did more than that, Setao said. You answered it. The falcon mark on Khmenu's arm flared with sudden heat, and he hissed, pulling back his sleeve. The image now shimmered, as though inked in fire. The falcon's sign has chosen you, Setao said, stepping closer. You are part of the cycle now. You walk the path once walked by the first voice, the one who spoke for God's men no longer remember. Then tell me what I'm supposed to do, Khemenu growled. Tell me how to undo it. You cannot. Setao reached into his robe and withdrew a single item, a bone disc carved with the image of scales tipped by a feather. But you can delay what comes. He pressed the disc into Khmenu's hand. Find the temple of the two lights. In the valley of dust. Before the second moon rises. What happens if I'm too late? Khemenu asked. Setao turned and began to walk away, vanishing into the shimmering heat. But before he was gone, he said, then the god within the idol will no longer whisper, it will speak. And then he was gone. Chapter 5, Escape from Wayset. The gates of Wayset loomed before him by moonlight, not the golden shimmer of memory, but cold stone stained by time. The same gates he'd passed through days ago, chased by guards, whispers, and fate. Now, he returned not as a fugitive, but as something more dangerous. As a man with knowledge. The serpent idol was secured tightly inside his satchel, wrapped in layers of linen and bound in a length of priestly cord he'd stolen from a desert shrine. He hadn't spoken since the encounter with Setao, but Khemenu felt its presence, always watching, always waiting. The falcon mark on his arm throbbed now and then, like a heartbeat echoing something beneath the skin. He waited until the city gates opened for the temple acolytes arriving for the second moon's offerings. Cloaked and hooded, Khemenu blended in among them, passing the outer guards with his head low and his tongue silent. But once within the walls, the city welcomed him with noise, color, and chaos. Market stalls burned with incense. Chants of offering echoed from nearby shrines. Priests paraded past, waving perfumed smoke over stone statues. Children laughed in the shadows. And through it all, Khemenu walked unseen. He wasn't here for worship or wares. He was here for answers. At the edge of the scribe district, he entered a narrow alley behind the old papyrus guild. It was here he'd grown up, among ink-stained robes and whispers of forbidden texts. He rapped 3 times on a warped wooden door carved with the eye of Horus. A voice answered from within. If it's about the wine jug, I told your mother it was already cracked. I'm not here for jugs, Khemenu replied. I'm here for truths. A pause. Then a rusted bolt slid open. The door creaked, revealing a bent man with wild white hair and a quill behind one ear. He wore 10 layers of robes, all of them stained with ink and pomegranate juice. Mentep. Once the royal record keeper. Now a hermit of words. Khemenu, Mentep said with a sigh. You always bring trouble. And you always serve it with dates. We're both consistent. They shared a quiet smile. Inside, Khemenu unrolled the stolen scroll and placed it on the low stone table. I found the idol. Mentep stopped mid-step. No, he said quietly. No, you didn't. I did. And it knew me. Mentep sat slowly. What did it show you? Khemenu told him. The whispers. The visions. The falcon. The jackal. Setao. The temple of the two lights. Mentep listened, eyes darkening with each word. When Khemenu finished, the old man stood and walked to a high shelf. He returned with a parchment, frayed, cracked, and sealed with wax so old it had turned black. This was meant for the next voice, Mentep said. Left by the last one. The next what? You are part of something older than even the gods, Mentep whispered. A cycle of awakening. Each age, one is marked. One is chosen. One is cursed. And you are all three. Khemenu touched his arm, where the falcon burned beneath the cloth. What am I supposed to do? Before Mentep could answer, there was a crash from outside. Then shouting. Steel on stone. Khemenu moved to the window and peeked through the lattice. Guards. Not palace guards, temple enforcers, clad in black linen and silver bands, their faces hidden behind golden jackal masks. They've tracked you, Mentep said. And they'll take more than the idol. Khemenu grabbed his satchel and the old scroll. Is there a back exit? I'm old, not stupid, Mentep muttered. He pulled aside a floor mat to reveal a trapdoor. It leads into the cistern tunnels. They'll take you to the river. But be warned. Let me guess, there's something worse than guards down there. Mentep didn't smile. Only if you believe in the dead. Khemenu dropped into darkness as the door above shattered and masked figures flooded the scribe's room. He landed in ankle-deep water, the walls slick with algae and thyme. The tunnels smelled of rotten ancient things better left buried. As he moved deeper into the black, torch in one hand, idol in the other, he heard the sound of breathing. Not his own. He wasn't alone in the dark. Chapter 6, The Temple of the False Sun. The tunnels beneath Wayset were older than the city itself. They whispered of forgotten reigns and kings whose names were scrubbed from stone. The walls wept moisture, and beneath Khemenu sandals, the ground sloped unevenly, water pooling in cracks too deep to see. His torch crackled in the stagnant air, sending dancing shadows over the ancient bricks. The further he walked, the more symbols he passed, some he recognized from his years as a royal scribe, glyphs of Nile spirits, protective charms, prayers to Happy and Ma'at. But then the glyphs changed. They grew older, cruder, and stranger. Serpents curled around suns. Eyes with no pupils stared from the walls. Repeated over and over, a single word in ancient script that pulsed in his mind when he looked at it. Netjuruku. The false ones. He didn't know what it meant. Not yet. Khemenu reached a wide circular junction where 3 tunnels split like serpents' tongues. One was collapsed. Another reeked of rotten stagnant water. The third was dry. And beneath its arch was a carved symbol, a sun, its rays bound in chains. He took that one. The air grew warmer as he descended, which made no sense. And then he heard it. Dripping water. The flutter of wings. Whispers. He stepped into a vast chamber beneath the city, hidden beneath layers of earth and stone, lost even to the priests. The ceiling soared above him like the dome of a great temple. The walls were covered in gold leaf panels depicting a sun god. At first glance, it resembled Ra. But this was no familiar image. This sun wore a serpent's smile. Its rays ended not in life, but in teeth. In the center of the chamber stood a shrine, untouched by time. Upon its altar burned a steady flame, flickering blue-white, though there was no oil and no source. He stepped closer, and the idol in his satchel began to thrum. You have returned. Khemenu froze. The voice echoed not in the chamber, but in his skull. The idol had spoken again. What is this place? He whispered aloud. A lie, the voice answered. A temple to a god who never was. The walls shimmered. Suddenly, the golden murals shifted before his eyes. The smiling sun god peeled away like flaking paint to reveal another image beneath. A jackal-headed figure holding a severed sun disk in one hand and a bound serpent in the other. Beneath it, more script burned into the stone. Here lies the god that wore the sun's face. The deceiver. The devourer. Bound beneath the Nile. Kheminu's mouth went dry. Not Ra, he said softly. Something pretending to be him. The idol pulsed again, stronger now. He felt it in his teeth. In his bones. He backed away from the shrine, heart pounding. That's when the floor shifted. Stone tiles sank inward. Sand poured into hidden seams. A hidden mechanism triggered with a dull groan, and from the shadows on either side of the chamber, two statues began to move. They weren't statues. Stone guardians, their forms twisted between jackal and man, stepped forward with weapons of obsidian in hand and empty sockets for eyes. The price of seeing, the idol whispered, is being seen. Khemenu turned and ran. Through a narrow corridor, he ducked beneath a collapsing archway and found a spiraling stairwell leading upward. He climbed, heart thudding, the echo of footsteps behind him, too heavy to be human. When he finally burst into open air, the sudden sunlight blinded him. He found himself not in the streets of Wayset, but in the desert, outside the city walls. He gasped, turning to look back. There was nothing behind him. No temple entrance. No stairwell. Just an endless dune where the city had once been. He collapsed into the sand, breathing hard, clutching the idol to his chest. They've buried the truth so deep, he whispered, even the gods tried to forget it. The sun above him shone bright and warm. But Khemenu had seen the face beneath it. And it had teeth. Chapter 7, The Curse of the Pharaoh's Mirror. The desert stretched endlessly before him, shimmering beneath the merciless sun. Khmenu's feet were cracked, his cloak stiff with salt and sand. The only sounds were the rustle of wind and the thud of his heartbeat in his ears. He had wandered for hours, maybe longer. Time had begun to slip sideways since the false temple, since the idol had shown him things he couldn't unsee. The god who wore the sun's face. The chained serpent. The bound lies of eternity. But it wasn't death that finally found him. It was water. Far on the horizon, past a jagged ridge of black stone, Khemenu saw a shimmer of green, an oasis, clustered with palms and huts, its pool catching sunlight like a polished shield. He didn't trust it. But he went anyway. The oasis was called Pahekau, House of Magic, a name whispered by nomads and merchants with the kind of reverence usually reserved for gods. Its people were few and strange, quiet, watchful. They took him in without question, offering water, flatbread, and shelter beneath a cloth pavilion. No one asked his name. No one looked directly at the satchel where the idol still pulsed, a steady rhythm like a hidden drumbeat. He was guided to a tent draped in blue silk, where a woman with ink-stained fingers and sand-blind eyes awaited him. Her name was Siyaret, and they called her the Mirror Sister. "You have seen what should not be seen," she said, before he even spoke. "The falcon flies into shadow." Khemenu narrowed his eyes. "You know the mark?" She nodded slowly, pointing to the bandages around her own eyes. "I looked too long into the mirror. My sight was taken, but the truth remained." "What mirror?" Khemenu asked. Siyaret gestured behind her. A curtain parted, revealing an arched stone door carved into the rock of the oasis wall. It was ancient, blackened with age, and sealed with symbols Khemenu had seen only once, beneath the temple in Wayset. "The Pharaoh's mirror," she said softly. "Cursed by Amenhotep the Forgotten. Guarded by silence. Feared by the gods." "Why?" Khemenu asked. "Because it shows you not what is, but what will be." Despite her warnings, Khemenu entered the mirror chamber. The air was thick and cold. The torches on the walls didn't flicker, they burned straight and tall, as if the room refused to acknowledge wind. At the far end stood a monolithic slab of polished black obsidian, smooth as still water, rimmed with gold and shaped like the Eye of Ra. The mirror. He approached slowly. The idol trembled in his satchel. When he looked into it, he saw himself. But not as he was. He stood on a field of bones, the sky above him torn and bleeding stars. His face was worn, his eyes glowing gold, and in his right hand was the idol, now fused to his flesh. All around him, gods knelt. Ra, Thoth, Anubis, Maat. And behind him stood the false sun, smiling, serpentine, whispering praises in his ear. "You will end the gods," it said in his own voice. He stumbled back, gasping. But the mirror had more to show. He saw the valley of dust, its sand turned black by fire. He saw a city crumbling, a child with his mark burned into her arm, whispering forgotten words. He saw Setau, the jackal envoy, impaled on a sun spear. And then, he saw himself alone, staring into the sky. Smiling. Becoming something else. No, he said aloud. No, that's not me. But the mirror did not lie. He tore himself away, heart racing, sweat cold on his skin. Sioret stood outside the chamber, her blind eyes turned to him. Now you see why the mirror is cursed. That future, he breathed, it's not fixed. No, she agreed. But it waits. That night, Khemenu sat beneath the stars, watching them flicker as if uncertain. He held the idol in his hands. It was quiet now. But the mark on his arm had grown darker. More defined. The falcon now bore a crown of fire. I won't become that, he whispered. But a voice, not his own, answered softly in the dark. You already have. Chapter 8, Blood and Ink. The journey to the city of scribes took 3 days across dry, cracked lands and abandoned trade routes choked by sand. The locals avoided it, whispering its ancient name with unease, Pomadu, the House of Words. Long ago, it had been a holy place. A haven for scholars, philosophers, priests, and those chosen by Thoth to record the wisdom of the gods. But now, it stood silent. Khemenu approached just after dawn. The city was surrounded by obelisks leaning inward like broken teeth. Each one was inscribed with countless names, many of which had been scratched out violently, some halfway erased, as if the stone itself resisted forgetting. The gates were open, but no one stood guard. He entered cautiously. Dust blanketed everything, statues with faces worn away, shrines to gods with missing eyes, scroll racks long crumbled into bone-dry wood. The air was thick with ink and age. Every wall, every column, every broken cart bore writing, layers upon layers of inked warnings, prayers, curses, and pleas for protection. The city was abandoned. But it was not empty. Khemenu walked the central avenue, past sunken libraries and toppled archive houses, until he came to the grand scriptorium, the ancient heart of the city, where scribes once recorded royal decrees and divine prophecy. A single door remained intact. At its center was the carved eye of Thoth, the pupil inlaid with black stone. And beneath it, an inscription. Only he who bears the mark may enter. Khemenu pulled back his sleeve. The falcon mark on his arm now shimmered faintly in the shadow. He pressed it to the door. There was a low click. And the door opened. The interior was preserved, untouched by wind or time. Scrolls lined the walls, stacked into neat spirals of reed and leather. A table at the center bore tools of ink and bronze styluses, their nibs still wet with dark red fluid. He stepped closer. Not ink. Blood. Welcome, Falcon, a voice rasped. He spun around, reaching for his satchel, but it was not a threat that faced him. It was a woman, ancient and stooped, her skin papery and thin, but her eyes sharp as obsidian. She wore a scribe's robe of deep red and held a quill in her hand like a dagger. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Then why was the door made for me? Khemenu asked, matching her stare. She considered that. Because prophecy is a knife. And even the gods cut themselves on it. Her name was Nebutra, last of the royal ink binders. She told him that when the gods left the world in flesh, they left behind their names, hidden in texts, bound in blood, encoded in riddles so deep only the chosen could read them. The idol is one such name, she whispered. And you, another. Khemenu frowned. What do you mean? Nebutra motioned to a scroll hidden beneath a slab of stone. She unfurled it slowly. The papyrus crackled like dried skin. The glyphs written there were familiar and foreign, ancient and divine. And there, in the middle, clear as dawn, was his name. Written hundreds of years ago. You were prophesied, Nebuchadnezzar said. A scribe born under the eclipse, bearing the falcon's mark, holding the serpent's cage. This isn't a prophecy, Khemenu muttered. It's a trap. Nebuchadnezzar smiled, bitter and tired. There is no difference. She offered to reveal the rest of the scroll, but warned him that knowledge must be earned. You must give something of yourself. The gods demand it. She gestured to the ink basin beside her. Khemenu looked down. Inside it swirled blood, his own. Or perhaps it would be. You want me to write? In your name. With your blood. That is the key. He hesitated. Then he rolled up his sleeve and reached for the knife. He cut. And dipped the stylus. And wrote. The letters came not from memory, but from something deeper, something old and waiting in the marrow of his bones. And when he finished the final glyph, the scroll glowed. Nebuchadnezzar bowed her head. The second seal is broken. Seal? Khemenu asked, voice weak. She did not answer. The scroll burst into flame, and in its ashes, a symbol remained burned into the table, a sun wrapped in wings. The same symbol he'd seen in the pharaoh's mirror. You are one step closer, Nebuchadnezzar said, to what waits beneath the Nile. Khemenu left Pamadu at dusk, his blood still warm, the satchel heavier than before. The idol didn't whisper. Not this time. But the falcon mark on his arm had changed again. Now, it bled ink. Chapter 9, The Daughters of Maat. The desert winds shifted as Khemenu descended into the Valley of the Scales, a place spoken of only in riddles and ritual, a valley hidden between two cliff walls shaped like open palms. According to Nebuchadnezzar's final words, if Khemenu wished to learn how to contain the idol's power rather than be consumed by it, he would need to stand before the daughters of Maat. They were not a priesthood. They were not even entirely human. They were said to be judges of divine truth. Vessels of Maat herself, the goddess of balance, justice, and cosmic order. Khemenu passed through a stone archway worn smooth by centuries of wind. Just beyond, a set of carved steps descended into a hidden basin filled with cool mist and blooming blue lotus. White linen banners fluttered from pillars etched with scales and feathers. A strange stillness blanketed the valley. Not lifeless, contemplative. Every sound, even the crunch of his sandals, felt muted here. As he stepped further, a low hum began to rise, not of voices, but of vibration, like air charged with judgment. From the mist, 3 figures emerged. Clad in robes of white and gold, their faces veiled with transparent silk, the daughters of Maat appeared more like spirits than women. Each held a feather carved from gold and a long staff tipped with obsidian. Their eyes glowed faintly beneath the veils, pale silver, unblinking. Khemenu, the tallest of them, spoke, her voice echoing with calm power. Son of the Falcon. Bearer of the serpent's seal. You stand before the scales. He dropped to one knee, not from reverence, but because he could feel the weight of being seen. You have walked where gods have feared to tread, said another. You carry a voice that should never have been heard. The third stepped forward and lifted her feather staff. We must weigh you. Khemenu frowned. I'm not dead. No, the first said. But your soul is out of balance. And if left unchecked, it will tip the world with it. They guided him to the center of the basin, where a great stone scale stood, 2 massive dishes carved from alabaster suspended by golden chains. One side held a white feather. The other, a blank space. Place your hand upon the altar, the first said. He did. Now, said the second, speak your truth. Which one? Khemenu muttered bitterly. The one I tell myself, or the one I'm afraid of. None of them answered. The feather did not move. So he spoke. I was once a scribe. I served the court. I loved words. I believed the gods were just. And now, one asked. Now I know better, he said. The gods lie. They hide. They manipulate. The scale twitched. I was framed for discovering too much. For reading what should have stayed hidden. I fled. I survived. And now? He hesitated. Now I carry something I don't understand. The idol pulsed faintly in his satchel. I've seen the false sun, he said. I've seen a version of myself that becomes a monster. And do you believe that is your fate? Asked the third. He was silent. The feather lifted from the dish and hung in the air. Then it dropped. The scale shifted. Ever so slightly. Not balanced. But not broken. The daughters studied it in silence. You are not beyond redemption, said the first. But the storm around you will destroy everything unless you learn to anchor yourself, said the second. You must find the feather of remembrance, said the third. It alone contained the idol's will. Where is it? Khemenu asked. It lies in the desert of forgotten names, said the first. Where even Ma'at cannot remember the dead. The mist began to rise. The daughters began to fade. Wait, he called. One last truth, Falcon, echoed their voices as one. You are not the first to bear this burden. And then they were gone. Khemenu remained kneeling before the scale, staring at the feather that had judged him. His hands still tingled. His soul was not yet in balance. But he had direction. He had a name. The desert of forgotten names. And the feather of remembrance awaited. Chapter 10, The Desert of Forgotten Names. No map showed the way to the desert of forgotten names. It was not marked by temples or obelisks. No caravan dared cross its sands. It was spoken of only in hushes, and even the wind seemed careful not to whisper it aloud. But Khemenu knew where to go. The daughters of Ma'at had left more than a direction in his mind. They had left an impression, a trail etched not in the earth, but in thought. He followed it like a man walking through a dream he could not wake from. After a day's journey across sun-scorched dunes and salt-crusted rocks, the landscape began to change. The sand turned gray. The air hung heavy, thick with silence. Not stillness, absence. No birds. No insects. Even the breeze that stirred his cloak carried no sound. The desert of forgotten names had no welcome. It simply was. By nightfall, the stars overhead were faint and uncertain. The moon flickered as though unsure of its place. Khemenu built no fire. Instinct told him the dark was not his enemy here. It was the light that would betray him. He dreamed that night. Not of gods or fire, but of nothing. A black void. No sounds. No thoughts. No name. And when he woke, for a single breath, he could not remember who he was. Then the falcon mark on his arm pulsed, and the memories rushed back in, painful, sharp, hot. The idol in his satchel throbbed like a second heartbeat. Still silent. Still watching. By the second day, things began to change. He saw footprints in the sand, leading nowhere. Faces carved into stone dunes, their features worn blank. An abandoned camp where personal items lay perfectly preserved, but the names scratched onto the bowls and travel scrolls were erased, not faded, not weathered, erased. By the third day, even his own name felt strange in his mind. It was near sundown when he found it. A single, twisted acacia tree, blackened and leafless, stood alone in a ring of stone. Beneath it, a slab of carved basalt shaped like a tomb, but with no inscription. No glyphs. Not even the name of the dead. But it wasn't what lay on the stone that caught Kheminu's eye. It was what hovered above it. A single, radiant feather, glowing gold, weightless and turning gently in the still air. The feather of remembrance. He approached slowly, reverently. The moment he stepped within the ring of stone, he felt it. The pressure. Forces unseen, reaching for his mind. A whisper rose, not from the idol, not from within, but from around him. Multitudes. Thousands of voices murmuring across the veil, each one lost, fragmented. My name was. Please. I had a son. I don't remember his face. Tell them I lived. Khemenu dropped to one knee, clutching his head. The memories weren't his. They were trying to enter him, like spirits with no home, searching for any vessel. His breath grew shallow. The sky above pulsed like a dying flame. The feather floated lower, hovering just above his reach. And then, a final voice spoke, clearer than all the rest. A child's voice. Khemenu. He looked up sharply. A small figure stood beyond the ring. A boy, no older than 10, eyes glowing faintly like polished moonstone. You must remember yourself, the boy said. Or you will be unmade. Khemenu's hands trembled. The whispers clawed at him. Who are you? He asked. A memory, said the boy. Yours? One you've forgotten. Why? Because the gods erased you once already. Khemenu gritted his teeth, focused on the falcon mark, and stepped forward into the heart of the ring. His hand reached for the feather. The moment his fingers touched it, all sound ceased. The whispers fell silent. The world narrowed to a single thought, his name. Khemenu. Khemenu, son of the falcon. The mark on his arm burned bright, then faded into a steady glow. The feather settled in his palm. Solid. Real. Light as air. He stood, panting, eyes wet with tears he hadn't known he was crying. I remember, he whispered. I remember. The boy was gone. But the desert felt different. Not empty. At peace. He left the ring of stone behind, the feather of remembrance tucked into his belt, bound now to his will. The idol pulsed again. This time, not with hunger, but with respect. Chapter 11, The City Beneath the Dunes. The desert wind had shifted. Where once it stung and stripped, now it seemed to guide, drawing Khemenu eastward across the ashen sands of the forgotten names. The feather of remembrance, now woven into a cord at his waist, glowed faintly in twilight. It whispered directions without words, pulling him, aligning him, like a compass guided not by stars, but by memory itself. Each step felt preordained. And yet, what he was walking toward felt like a place outside time. On the morning of the third day, Khemenu stood atop a high ridge of pale dune. Below him, the sand rippled oddly, like breath beneath a blanket. It shifted even when the wind did not blow. And then he saw them. Structures. Half-buried domes and columns. Obelisks poking up through the sand like bones. A wide, spiraling ramp of sandstone, barely visible, winding down into a basin. An entire city, swallowed whole by time. No name marked it. But the feather at his waist blazed to life as he approached. He descended slowly, torch in hand, cloak billowing behind him like a funeral shroud. The sand grew cooler the deeper he went, until the heat of the sun vanished entirely, swallowed by the breath of the deep. At the center of the basin stood a great entrance carved directly into the rock, flanked by two statues of hawk-headed figures in regal headdresses. But these were not horrors. Their eyes were blindfolded. Their mouths covered. Guardians of silence. The moment Khemenu stepped into the city, he felt it. Weight. Not physical, but spiritual. Heavy. Watching. He passed buildings with doors sealed by sigils no longer used. He saw murals that depicted cities being built by fire, not hand. Glyphs twisted in spirals, representing gods whose names had long been stricken from temple walls. This was not a place of worship. It was a place of containment. And then, as he passed under an arch that bore no name, the whispers returned. But these were different. Not desperate, like the desert of forgotten names. These were instructional. Rhythmic. Chanting. He followed them to the base of a ziggurat, its peak barely visible beneath the collapsed ceiling of the subterranean dome. Steps led upward, but they were inverted. Carved not to ascend, but to descend into the structure, spiraling like a serpent swallowing its own tail. He entered. Inside, the air shimmered with old power. Torchlight revealed vast halls lined with statues, each one missing its head. Some bore wings, some claws, some even multiple arms. Khemenu could not tell whether they were gods, demons, or something else entirely. At the end of the hall was a massive stone door, unmarked, flawless, sealed with 4 iron bands etched with strange symbols. At its center, a circular depression, shaped exactly like the serpent idol. He stepped forward, heart racing. "This is a prison," he whispered. He reached for the idol in his satchel. It vibrated against his palm, warm, eager. But before he could place it into the seal, the feather of remembrance flared at his side. A voice echoed through the chamber. Not the idol. Not a god. His own voice. This is not the first time. Khemenu turned. Behind him, stepping from the shadows, was himself. But older. Wiser. Wounded. He wore a cloak of gold-threaded linen, the falcon mark on his arm glowing like molten metal. His left eye was gone, replaced by a black stone. And in his hand, he held nothing. "You tried this before," the older Khemenu said. "You came here once. You placed the idol. You thought you could end it. Did it work?" the younger asked, stunned. "For a time," the echo replied. "But truth cannot be buried. It can only be rewritten." "What is this city?" Khemenu demanded. "Why do I remember it only now?" "Because this place is where your name was first erased." The older self stepped aside, motioning to the stone door. "Behind this seal lies not a god. Not a demon. But the origin of it all. What happens if I open it?" "You remember everything," the echo said. "And nothing will ever let you forget again. And if I don't? Then someone else will. And the world won't survive it." The two locked eyes. The same soul, pulled across time, past and future echoing back upon themselves like a spiral. Then the older Khemenu stepped backward and vanished into shadow. Alone now, the true Khemenu turned back to the door. He placed the idol into the seal. The band snapped open with a sound like thunder echoing through water. The door began to rise. And behind it, breathing. Slow. Heavy. Eternal. Something had waited beneath the dunes. And now it was waking up. Chapter 12, The God Who Was Erased. The stone door groaned upward, releasing a rush of air that smelled of ancient dust, salt, and something far older, like charred incense from a forgotten altar. As the last of the iron bands crumbled away, Khemenu stood alone before a passage of utter darkness. Behind him, the city beneath the dunes lay in silence. Before him, something stirred. He raised his torch. The flame dimmed. Not from lack of oil, but as if the dark before him had a will of its own. It pushed back against the light, reluctant to reveal what had been sealed away. "You were never meant to find this place," whispered the voice of the idol. "And yet, here I am," Khemenu muttered. "Always where I don't belong." He stepped forward. The chamber beyond was impossibly vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. Ancient pillars carved from obsidian spiraled upward like bones turned inside out. Each one bore glyphs so old, so jagged, they seemed to hurt the eye to read. Not Egyptian. Not human. At the center of the room stood a stone throne, cracked and weeping black sap. Around it lay the remains of offerings, crumbling statues, rusted weapons, broken ankhs. And sitting upon the throne, bound in chains of gold and salt, was a figure. Not entirely dead. Not entirely alive. The being's skin was gray like worn marble. Its face was wrapped in faded linen, but one eye was exposed, and it was wrong. The iris spun slowly, like a sun collapsing inward. Its chest rose and fell with slow, patient breath. The chains binding it pulsed with ancient symbols, wards, perhaps. Maybe prayers. Maybe threats. Khemenu felt the air tighten. The idol in his satchel burned like fire. You stand before what the gods feared, the voice inside his head said. Not a god of men, but a god of gods. Khemenu stepped closer. The being stirred. Its single eye fixed on him. And it spoke. Its voice echoed not in sound, but in the vibration of thought, 1,000 voices, layered in harmony and conflict. Khemenu. You know me? Khemenu asked. We made you. Who are you? The chains groaned as the being leaned forward slightly. I was once the light before the sun. The breath before the name. The God who wrote the first truth. Khemenu swallowed. You were erased. Not erased, the being said, buried. Why? Because I spoke a truth the others feared, that gods are not eternal. That worship is a currency. That when men stop believing, even divinity dies. Khemenu felt his pulse racing. The falcon mark on his arm pulsed, once, twice, then stopped. For the first time since its appearance, it went still. They came together, the bound god said. Ra. Ma'at. Thoth. Even Set. They sealed me here. And in doing so, unbalanced the scales. Khemenu blinked. So you are the reason Ma'at is fading. The reason the world is cracking. No. I am the symptom. The cause is the lie that was left in my place. Images flooded his mind, the smiling sun god with serpent eyes, the mirror in the oasis, the false temples, the scarred guardians, the priesthoods who worshipped power, not balance. A world built on a story with a missing page. And the idol? Khemenu asked. A cage. A key. A test. Each bearer shapes the world by how they carry it. Most fail. One destroyed a kingdom. One created a cult. One became a god. Khemenu stepped closer. What do you want from me? Not want. Need. The bound god leaned forward until the chains went taut. Break one chain. Just one. I will not ask for more. And if I do, you will know everything. And you will never doubt again. The idol pulsed in his bag. The feather of remembrance flared at his belt, hot. Warning. He stood still, one hand near the satchel, the other near the feather. Behind him, the city slept. Before him, the first lie waited to be undone. You say you are the truth, Khemenu said softly. Then you will understand why I say no. He turned and walked away. The god did not shout. Did not curse. But as the chamber door closed behind him, Khemenu heard a whisper. You will return. And he knew. He would. Chapter 13, Tomb of the Living Flame. The sun blazed high over the dunes, but the heat that pressed against Kheminu's back had nothing to do with the sky. It was deeper. Older. It came from beneath the earth, pulsing through the soles of his feet and crawling up his spine like a memory he hadn't lived yet. 3 days had passed since he left the city beneath the dunes, and he hadn't slept once. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the voice again, the one that called from behind the chains. The one that promised truth at the price of balance. You will return. But not yet. Now he was searching for a different truth, the weapon hidden in the tomb of the living flame, said to be forged by Ra himself before time had language. According to the daughters of Ma'at, it was the only relic that could sever the spiritual bindings between worlds. And he would need it. Because something had begun to awaken. The entrance to the tomb lay beneath a canyon carved by forgotten rivers, where the sand gave way to fireglass and the very stones bled red when cracked. No map led here, only the feather of remembrance, which shimmered and tugged each time Khemenu veered from the true path. As he approached the tomb's opening, heat rolled out of the cavern like a beast breathing in its sleep. The torch in his hand refused to stay lit. There was no need. The walls glowed from within. Etched with flame-colored glyphs and sacred spells, the stone burned without smoke or ash. And yet, nothing crumbled. Nothing charred. "This place doesn't burn things," Khemenu whispered. "It remembers how." He descended a narrow stairway, each step hotter than the last. His skin was slick with sweat, eyes stinging, lungs full of dry, angry air. At the base of the stair, the tomb opened into a vast chamber. And there, in the center, was the altar of flame. It stood on a circular dais, surrounded by rings of glowing script, each one etched in molten gold. Floating above the altar, turning slowly, wreathed in fire, was a staff. Simple in shape. Radiant in purpose. The scepter of Ra. The only weapon said to channel the flame of the true sun, not the serpent's imitation, but the source of balance and light. Khemenu stepped forward. But the fire flared, and something stepped between him and the weapon. A guardian. It rose from the far shadows, silent and graceful. Its body was made of blackened stone, shaped like a man, but its joints cracked with fire, and its face was a burning mask of gold. Its eyes held no pupils, only two steady flames. Khemenu froze. He had read of this thing in temple scrolls long forgotten. "The flame-bound," he whispered. "The first guardian." It did not speak. It only charged. Khemenu dodged as the guardian struck, its obsidian blade smashing into the ground, sending a wave of heat through the stone. He rolled across the scorched floor, drew his bronze dagger, useless, and tried to parry. The blade melted in his hand. "Of course," he muttered. Ra's guardian wouldn't be killed by mortal steel. The feather of remembrance pulsed at his hip. He reached for it, instinct guiding him now. As he held it aloft, the guardian stopped. Paused. The flames in its eyes flickered, recognition. Khemenu didn't hesitate. "I seek balance," he shouted. "I carry the memory of what came before." The feather flared, blinding white, and the glyphs on the chamber walls pulsed in rhythm. The guardian's blade lowered. And then, it bowed. The flames around the altar stilled. The scepter descended, slowly, until it hovered just above Khmenu's outstretched hands. He took it. And the moment he did, the flame entered him, not burning, but transforming. He saw it all. The sun before it had a name. The first lie carved into the stone of creation. The God who had been erased, not for what he did, but for what he refused to do. The falcon who turned from his brothers to bear a truth alone. When Khemenu opened his eyes, the guardian was gone. The chamber had gone cold. And the scepter pulsed faintly in his hand, like a heartbeat that was now his own. He stepped out of the tomb at dusk. And there, waiting on the ridge above the canyon, stood Setal, the jackal's envoy. "You found it," the priest said. "I didn't find it," Khemenu replied. "It found me." Setal's expression darkened. "Then the war has begun." Chapter 14, marked by Set. The twilight was thick with dust as Khemenu and Setal, the jackal's envoy, walked side by side across the upper ridges of the burned wadi. They spoke little. Silence suited the path ahead. But Khemenu couldn't stop glancing at the scepter in his hand, its shaft warm even in the desert night, glowing faintly like embers trapped in gold. He had faced fire and earned power. But with that power came a presence. He felt it behind his eyes. Not like the whispers from the idol, this was something else. A watcher. They made camp beneath a cluster of wind-carved rocks. The fire burned low. Setal laid out an offering of dates, bitter herbs, and chalk beside a circle of black salt. "You still believe in protection rites?" Khemenu asked. "I believe in invitation more than protection," Setal replied, calmly. "Tonight, something may come. I'd rather it be welcomed than angry." Khemenu didn't sleep. Not really. At some hour between dusk and dawn, the wind fell silent. The fire turned blue. And something arrived. Not a figure. Not footsteps. Just a presence, vast, ancient, and coiling like a storm behind a veil. The idol trembled in Khemenu's satchel. The scepter warmed in his grip. And then, a shadow stepped out from the dark beyond the firelight. It wore the shape of a man, tall and cloaked in blood-red linen that never touched the ground. Its head was jackal-like but elongated, stretched unnaturally, its ears curved inward like blades. Its eyes burned like coals soaked in venom. Khemenu stood, instinct screaming. Setao remained kneeling. "You've brought me here," the shadow said, voice low and scraped raw, like wind over bone. "Now let me see what you carry." "You're not Anubis," Khemenu said. The shadow tilted its head. "No," it said, almost amused. "I am Setek, Lord of Storms, Breaker of Balance. I am the silence after betrayal and the chaos beneath truth." Khemenu's heart thundered. Set, the god of the Red Land. Once protector of Ra's solar bark, later god of chaos, storms, and war. But even in myth, feared more than followed. Set's burning gaze dropped to the scepter. "You took the fire," he murmured. "Ra's last gift." Curious. He stepped closer, and the flames between them died. "And still," Set said, "you carry the cage." Khemenu touched the satchel containing the serpent idol. "Why are you here?" "To mark you," Set said. "As all chosen are marked. You have awakened balance, fire, memory. Now, you must know chaos." Before Khemenu could move, Set raised a clawed hand and placed 2 fingers on his forehead. The world shattered. He fell, not through space, but through thought. He saw himself burning a city, laughter in his throat. He saw himself kneeling before the chained god beneath the dunes, his eyes glowing. He saw himself dead, crucified on a pillar of stone, a serpent coiled through his ribs. He saw a throne, golden and cracked, with no one seated upon it. And behind it all, Set, watching, laughing, waiting. When he woke, the fire was dead. Setao sat where he had before, eyes closed, lips moving in a silent chant. Khemenu gasped and sat upright. His forehead burned. He rushed to the pool nearby, stared into his reflection. Beneath his left eye, a faint sigil had appeared, etched into his skin like a brand. Not visible in daylight unless you looked closely. A hooked staff crossing a coiled snake, the mark of Set. "He has touched you," Setao said, his voice hoarse. "Not even the gods know what that means." "I saw futures," Khemenu whispered. "Versions of me, not me, dying, ruling, destroying." "He doesn't give prophecy," Setao replied. "He gives possibility." Khemenu stared into the dying embers. "I'm being pulled in too many directions," he muttered. "Balance, fire, memory, chaos. All forces the gods tried to control," Setao said. "All parts of creation they buried." He turned toward the horizon. "But now, they live in you." Khemenu stood. The scepter pulsed in his hand. The idol shifted in his satchel. The feather flared against his hip. And now, chaos flowed in his blood. "So be it," he said softly. "If I must carry all of it, I'll carry it forward."
Every story has an ending, but some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.